For millions of Americans along the Gulf Coast, the next 24 hours could be the most dangerous of the week. Tropical Storm Bertha is no longer just another storm spinning over the Gulf of Mexico. It is now closing in on Louisiana. Communities from the Florida Panhandle to southeastern Louisiana are already feeling its effects. Strong wind gusts, heavy bands of rain, rough surf, and rising coastal waters. Forecasters say Bertha is expected to make landfall in southeastern Louisiana Wednesday evening. While it is not forecast to become a hurricane, officials warn that its greatest danger may not be the wind. Instead, it is the combination of slow movement, relentless rainfall, and coastal flooding that could create serious problems across the region. According to the National Hurricane Center, Bertha has strengthened to maximum sustained winds of around 60 miles per hour. The storm is moving slowly toward the west-northwest. That slow speed is exactly what concerns meteorologists. A slow-moving storm can dump enormous amounts of rain over the same locations for hours. Instead of quickly passing through, Bertha may linger long enough to overwhelm drainage systems, flood streets, and inundate low-lying neighborhoods. Emergency officials are urging residents not to focus only on the storm's wind speed. History has shown that many tropical storms cause devastating flooding despite never reaching hurricane strength. This storm is following a similar pattern. Tropical storm warnings now stretch across a large section of the northern Gulf Coast. New Orleans remains one of the cities being watched most closely. The city sits in an area where heavy rainfall and high tides can quickly create dangerous flooding, even without a major hurricane. Officials are also monitoring conditions along coastal Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle. In many communities, preparations are already underway. Residents are securing outdoor furniture. Businesses are protecting storefronts. Emergency crews are checking pumps, flood barriers, and drainage canals before the worst weather arrives. Meanwhile, offshore energy companies are taking no chances. Some oil production facilities in the Gulf have begun shutting down operations. Workers have been evacuated from offshore platforms as companies move to protect employees and equipment before Bertha reaches the coastline. These precautionary measures highlight the uncertainty that still surrounds the storm. Although Bertha is expected to remain below hurricane strength, even a moderate tropical storm can disrupt transportation, damage infrastructure, and leave thousands without electricity. Meteorologists say one unusual feature makes Bertha different from many tropical storms. Its strongest rain bands are concentrated on one side of the circulation rather than evenly surrounding the center. This uneven structure means some communities could experience torrential rainfall, while others only a short distance away receive far less. That makes forecasting local flooding especially challenging. At this stage, emergency managers are asking people not to focus solely on the forecast track. Even small shifts in the storm's path could dramatically change where the heaviest rain falls. For families living near rivers, bayous, and low-lying coastal communities, the next several hours will be critical. As Bertha approaches land, the biggest question is no longer whether the storm will arrive. The question is how much water it will bring with it. And for many Gulf Coast communities, that answer could determine how severe this event ultimately becomes. As Bertha inches closer to the Louisiana coastline, meteorologists say the storm's greatest danger is becoming increasingly clear. It is not the wind, it is the water. Bertha is moving at a remarkably slow pace. That slow movement gives its rain bands more time to unload massive amounts of water over the same areas. Instead of a brief downpour, some communities could experience hours of persistent, heavy rainfall. Forecasts call for widespread rainfall totals of 2 to 4 inches across parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle. But isolated locations could receive significantly more if the strongest rain bands stall overhead. That raises the risk of flash flooding. Flash floods can develop with little warning. A neighborhood that appears safe in the morning can become impassable just a few hours later. Roadways may disappear beneath fast-moving water. Drainage systems can quickly become overwhelmed, and vehicles caught in flooded streets can be swept away in surprisingly shallow water. Emergency officials continue to remind drivers of a simple message. Turn around, don't drown. For many longtime Gulf Coast residents, flooding is often more destructive than the storm itself. Homes may survive the wind only to suffer severe water damage that takes months to repair. Businesses can remain closed for weeks. Families may be forced to evacuate with little notice if floodwaters begin rising rapidly. Another concern is coastal flooding. Although the threat of a major storm surge has decreased, Water levels along portions of southeastern Louisiana and the Mississippi coastline are still expected to rise. High tides combined with strong onshore winds could push seawater into low-lying neighborhoods, marshes, and coastal highways, unlike the violent wall of water associated with major hurricanes. This type of flooding often develops more gradually, but that does not make it less dangerous. Water slowly covering roads at night can catch drivers completely by surprise. Saltwater flooding can also damage homes, vehicles, docks, and electrical equipment. In New Orleans, officials are paying particularly close attention. The city relies on an extensive network of levees, drainage canals, and powerful pumping stations to manage excess water. Those systems have been upgraded significantly over the years. However, when intense rainfall falls faster than pumps can remove it, localized flooding can still occur. Residents are being urged to avoid unnecessary travel once conditions begin to deteriorate. Strong wind gusts may also create additional hazards. Loose tree branches could fall onto roads. Power lines may be damaged. Scattered power outages are possible across several Gulf Coast communities. Emergency crews are already preparing for rapid response if outages become widespread. Air travel may also face disruptions. Heavy rain, gusty winds, and reduced visibility can delay arrivals and departures at airports throughout the region. Drivers should also prepare for changing road conditions. Heavy rainfall can reduce visibility within minutes, making travel significantly more dangerous, especially after sunset. Meanwhile, conditions offshore remain rough. Large waves and dangerous rip currents continue to threaten beaches along parts of the Gulf Coast. Officials strongly advise swimmers to stay out of the water until the storm has completely passed. What makes Bertha especially challenging is that its impacts will not be identical everywhere. One community may receive only light rain. Another, just a few miles away, could experience flash flooding severe enough to require water rescues. That uncertainty is why emergency managers continue urging residents to monitor local forecasts instead of focusing only on the projected center of the storm. As Bertha moves closer to landfall, emergency preparations are entering their most critical phase. But even as residents secure their homes and gather emergency supplies, another important question is beginning to emerge. What happens after the storm reaches land? Will Bertha quickly fall apart over Louisiana? Or could the system survive long enough to create new problems farther west? Those questions are now becoming the focus of forecasters across the Gulf Coast. As Tropical Storm Bertha approaches landfall, many people assume the danger will end once the center of the storm moves inland. Meteorologists say that assumption could be misleading. For tropical systems like Bertha, landfall is often the beginning of a different phase of the storm. Once the circulation crosses the coastline, it will begin losing strength. Without the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico to fuel it, Bertha is expected to gradually weaken. Its winds should decrease. The storm's structure will slowly begin to break apart. But weakening does not mean the threat disappears. In fact, many tropical storms produce their worst flooding after landfall. Even as wind speeds decline, the storm can continue releasing enormous amounts of rain across hundreds of miles. Flooded roads, overflowing rivers, waterlogged neighborhoods. These impacts often continue long after the strongest winds have faded. Forecasters are also monitoring another possibility. Some weather models suggest that parts of Bertha's circulation could drift back over the Gulf after moving across Louisiana. If that happens, the system could regain some organization over warm ocean water. At this point, experts stress that this is only one possible scenario. There is no confirmation that Bertha will redevelop. However, it remains an area of active monitoring because even a weakened tropical system can quickly change if environmental conditions become favorable. Texas emergency officials are also paying close attention. While Bertha is not currently forecast to strike Texas directly, any westward shift in the storm's remnants could increase rainfall across parts of the state later this week. For now, that possibility remains uncertain. The exact path will depend on how the storm interacts with upper-level winds after landfall. Beyond the immediate weather threat, Bertha is already affecting critical industries along the Gulf Coast. Offshore oil and natural gas operations have taken precautionary steps to protect workers and infrastructure. Several platforms have temporarily suspended operations, and non-essential personnel have been evacuated before conditions worsen. While these shutdowns are designed to improve safety, they also highlight how tropical storms can affect the nation's energy supply chain. Ports may temporarily suspend operations. Shipping schedules could be delayed. Commercial fishing fleets are remaining in harbor until seas become safe again. Airlines are also preparing for potential disruptions. Strong crosswinds, heavy rainfall, and poor visibility can force delays or cancellations at several airports across the region. Travelers are being encouraged to check flight status before leaving for the airport. On land, utility companies have positioned repair crews across Louisiana and neighboring states. Extra personnel, equipment, and replacement power poles are already staged in areas expected to receive the worst weather. Their goal is simple: restore electricity as quickly as possible once conditions become safe. Local governments are also preparing for the recovery phase. Public works crews are ready to remove fallen trees. Emergency responders have high water rescue vehicles standing by. Shelters remain available for residents who may need temporary housing if flooding forces evacuations. For many Gulf Coast communities, these preparations have become a familiar routine. Residents have experienced hurricanes, tropical storms, and flooding many times before. That experience has taught an important lesson. Never underestimate a storm simply because it is not a hurricane. Some of the most costly weather disasters in recent history were caused primarily by flooding rather than extreme winds. That is exactly why officials continue urging residents to remain vigilant over the next several days. The coming hours will determine whether Bertha becomes a relatively minor tropical storm or another reminder that water is often nature's most destructive force. As emergency crews prepare for landfall, millions of Americans are now watching one final question: how severe will the damage be once the storm has finally passed? By the time Tropical Storm Bertha finally moves inland, millions of Gulf Coast residents will already have experienced hours of heavy rain, gusty winds, and rising water. But for emergency officials, the storm's departure does not mark the end of the danger. Instead, it begins a new phase: the recovery. Over the next 48 hours, crews will assess flooded neighborhoods, inspect bridges and roadways, restore power, and determine whether communities can safely reopen. In some areas, the damage may be limited to fallen trees and scattered power outages. In others, floodwaters could remain for days, preventing residents from returning home. Even after the rain stops, hidden dangers often remain. Standing water can conceal damaged roads, open drainage canals, and dangerous debris. Electrical hazards become a serious concern when floodwater reaches homes or businesses. Health officials also warn that floodwater may contain fuel, chemicals, sewage, and other contaminants. That is why residents are urged to avoid walking or driving through flooded areas, even after the storm appears to have passed. Insurance experts say one of the biggest mistakes homeowners make is waiting too long to document damage. Photographs, videos, and written records taken as soon as it is safe can be critical when filing insurance claims. Local authorities are also reminding residents to stay informed through official weather updates. Although Bertha is expected to weaken over land, weather conditions can still change quickly. Additional rainfall may continue long after the center of the storm has moved away. Flood warnings often remain in effect even after tropical storm warnings are canceled. For businesses, every hour matters. Ports, highways, rail lines, and airports all play a vital role in moving goods across the Gulf Coast. Any prolonged disruption can affect deliveries, travel, and local economies far beyond the immediate impact zone. Meanwhile, utility companies will begin the difficult task of restoring electricity. Repair crews often work around the clock after tropical storms, but widespread flooding can delay access to damaged equipment. For residents, patience and preparation remain essential. Emergency managers recommend keeping enough food, drinking water, medications, flashlights, batteries, and phone chargers to remain self-sufficient for several days if necessary. One of the most important messages from officials is simple: do not become complacent because Bertha is classified as a tropical storm instead of a hurricane. History has repeatedly shown that tropical storms are fully capable of producing deadly floods, widespread damage, and costly recoveries. The name of the storm is less important than the conditions it creates. As of now, meteorologists continue tracking Bertha's exact path and monitoring whether any part of the system could reorganize after moving inland. Forecasts will continue to evolve as new satellite data, radar imagery, and Hurricane Hunter aircraft observations become available. For families across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle, the next several days will require caution, patience, and close attention to official updates. The full extent of Bertha's impact will not be known until floodwaters recede and damage assessments are complete. Until then, emergency officials are asking one thing of everyone living in the storm's path: take every warning seriously, stay informed, and never underestimate the power of moving water. Thank you for watching. If you found this report helpful, consider subscribing for more in-depth coverage of major weather events, public safety updates, and breaking news from across the United States. Stay safe, and we'll continue to bring you the latest developments as Tropical Storm Bertha unfolds.